Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this author interaction organized as a part of the NLF Reading Challenge 2021. My name is Karthika. I'm the head of reading at Neev Academy. We're very excited to be here, and we hope you are too. The NLF Reading Challenge is a 6-month-long reading event from January to June 2021 for students between 10 to 13 years of age. It is open to participants on the competitive or non-competitive tracks. We have students from across India participating in the challenge. In addition to fun book-based activities and regular author interactions, the challenge will conclude with a quiz competition that will see the 3 best teams win gold, silver, and bronze engraved trophies respectively, certificates of achievement, and a great set of books. Before we dive into the interaction, we would just like to point out to our audience that as this is a webinar, we will not be able to respond if you raise your virtual hand. Please do type your questions in the Q&A box. In fact, if you already have your questions ready, please feel free to type them out. If you're a student, a teacher, or a school librarian, please do mention the name of your school along with your questions as well. Today we have with us a very special guest, the award-winning and critically acclaimed writer, Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, whose book, The War That Saved My Life, most of us have read. Kimberly Brubaker Bradley is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of several acclaimed middle-grade novels, including Fighting Words, The War That Saved My Life, The War I Finally Won, and Jefferson's Sons. She has received the prestigious Newbery Honor in 2016 for The War That Saved My Life and in 2021 for Fighting Words. Kimberly and her husband have 2 grown children. They live with 2 dogs, an assortment of horses, and a surplus of cats on a 52-acre farm in Bristol, Tennessee. Welcome, Kim. We're very happy to have you with us today.
Hello, it's very nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to students and especially from India, which is a country I have been to and very much enjoyed. I'm going to start by reading a little bit from The War That Saved My Life. And Karthika, is it all right if I read a little from The War I Finally Won?
Sure.
Both?
Absolutely.
So The War That Saved My Life is about 2 siblings, Ada and Jamie, and they're evacuated during World War II from their home in London to the countryside, and it becomes a life-changing event for them, particularly for Ada. So this starts with the 2 of them on the train. Jamie whispered, Ada, look. A girl on a pony was racing the train. She was actually on top of the pony, sitting on its back, her legs hanging one off each side. She held bits of string or something in her hands, and the strings were attached to the pony's head. The girl was laughing, her face wide open with joy, and it was clear even to me that she meant to be on the pony. She was directing the pony, telling it what to do, riding the pony, and the pony was running hard. I knew ponies from the lane, but had only seen them pull carts. I hadn't known you could ride them. I hadn't known they could go so fast. The girl leaned forward against the pony's flying mane. Her lips moved as though she was shouting something. Her legs thumped the pony's sides, and the pony surged forward faster, brown legs flying, eyes bright. They ran alongside the train as it curved around their field. I saw a stone wall ahead of them. I gasped. They were going to hit it. They were going to be hurt. Why didn't she stop the pony? They jumped it. They jumped the stone wall and kept running while the train tracks turned away from their field. Suddenly I could feel it, the running, the jump, the smoothness, the flying. I recognized it with my whole body, as though it was something I'd done 100 times before, something I loved to do. I tapped the window. I'm going to do that, I said. Jamie laughed. Why not? I said to him. You walk pretty good, he said. I didn't tell him that my foot hurt so bad I wasn't sure I'd ever walk again. Yes, I said, I did. Now the piece I like to read with that comes from the sequel, The War I Finally Won. And this is a few years later. It's during World War II. Ada is out riding a horse with her friend Maggie and Maggie's brother Jonathan. And Ada is actually riding Jonathan's horse, Oben. The hedge exploded. It was a grouse, not a bomb. A grouse with a nest in the hedge who took exception to the horses coming so near and flew out squawking and flapping straight for Oben's head. Oben spooked and ran. I nearly came off him with the first leap, but I saved myself with a double handful of mane. The hedge flew past. Maggie screamed. Oben stretched out. He ran faster and faster, swallowing the ground. I pulled myself up like a jockey, legs straight in the stirrups, fighting panic. I hauled on the reins. I wasn't strong enough to stop him, not when he'd lost his head so entirely. Sit up, Jonathan roared, far behind me. Hold on. The wind made my eyes tear. The hedge blurred. My breath caught in my throat, and the pounding of the horse's gallop echoed in my bones. We were flying. Flying, really flying. Butter never in his life could have gone so fast. Oben was a thoroughbred, bred to run. He stretched his neck out farther, lengthened his stride even more. Suddenly, my fear fell away. Oben was flying, and I was flying with him, flying. I was flying. It was the best, most joyful feeling in the world. I dropped my hands to Oben's mane. I let the reins run out, let my hands surge with the movement of his mouth. Instead of pulling him in, I kicked him forward. He bunched his hindquarters and ran harder. Oben loved to run. I loved Oben running. I kicked again. I whooped. His speed increased until his stride began to feel as smooth as rushing wind, as effortless as flowing water. I moved with him effortlessly. On the day I was evacuated, I'd looked out the window of our train and seen a girl galloping a pony, racing the train. Now I was that girl, galloping, laughing, my head thrown back, the wind tugging my hair. I'd become the person I longed to be. And I have someone who wants to say hi. This is my new puppy. Her name is Beverly Cleary Bradley. And I named her after Beverly Cleary, the American author who died recently at age 104. So, but she was playing, wanted my attention while I was reading, of course.
That's lovely. I didn't think we would get to meet any version of Beverly Cleary on our event, but it's so nice to see her.
She can go play with her sister now.
Thank you so much for the reading, Kim.
Oh, you're so welcome.
All right. So while we wait for the questions from our audience to come in, and I'm sure they have a lot of questions, before we start the Q&A round, I just want to use the opportunity to thank one of our very dedicated library patrons, Noor Sabarwal, who helped us out with giving us pictures of the Q&A section of your book, because all our copies were issued out and the Kindle edition didn't have the Q&A. And so thank you, Noor, for helping us prepare for the session.
I love to hear that all the copies were gone. That's the best thing.
Yeah, it's a very popular book. So one of the questions that we've just got in Kim, and we'll get to that in a bit. But before that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about you've talked about the fact that you like historical fiction because you like to focus on the little stories that might be missed out by the greater narratives. And you've said that you became interested in evacuees because your mother read you Bedknobs and Broomsticks when you were a child.
Yes.
You've also described yourself as an Anglophile, and you've dedicated your book to Kathleen Magliochetti, who first introduced you to England. So would you be able to tell us a little more about your fashion?
Absolutely. So when I was growing up, I grew up in Indiana, which is a flat agricultural part of the United States, sort of in the middle of the country, in a small town. Well, yeah, small town, Fort Wayne. And across the street from me, there was a family that was the Magliochettis, Kathleen, but Mrs. Magliochetti, when I was growing up. And they had 3 small children, and I babysat them quite often. And when I was 13, they moved to England. And so when I was 14, I flew over by myself to visit them for a few weeks in England. And it was a big trip to go on my own, even though they were waiting on the other end. But it was also just fantastic. They lived in a little village not far outside London. So I took the train into London a few times, but I loved it. My mother grew up reading. I grew up with my mother reading all sorts of, Bedknobs and Broomsticks has evacuees, but The Secret Garden and, all sorts of things that took place in England were part of my regular reading.
Interesting. We have a comment from one of our viewers, Gio Lee, who says that the book reminded her of the Chronicles of Narnia, where the siblings have to leave home and take a train station to go to a house that they didn't know. I think children were very brave, Gio says. I also want to ask you, Kim, about your character of Susan, who seems, and you've said that Ada is the closest character to your heart
Yes.
from this whole series. But it seems like Susan was also a character who was way ahead of her time in terms of the way she lived her life, in terms of her education. And
Yeah, to some degree she was. And there was sort of, there's sort of layers to Susan where some of it is more, public and some is more private. But I don't think she was anachronistic, but she didn't really fit in either with the society she was in. Susan is a strange character for me because she was very easy for me to write, and she sort of showed up entirely. I didn't have to. The whole time you're writing, you go back and you change things and you think, well, she probably feels this way instead of this way. And you have to, maybe Ada's thinking this and it changes the whole scene. But Susan just kept showing up as Susan and being herself. She wasn't someone I had to think about. And I don't know why that is. I do think that I wanted to give Susan the sort of mother, or I wanted to give Ada the sort of mother she needed. And that was Susan. So.
I don't know. Right.
Yeah, and sort of Susan's background helps her understand Ada without being someone who's had to like sit there, and she doesn't have to try to figure Ada out. She just sort of gets her. So
Right. We have a few questions that have come in, Kim, on whether the story is real, what inspired you to write. So maybe if you could tell her.
Yeah, the story is not real. Ada is entirely fictional. But the evacuation is real, and it was really where the story started because, World War II was a global event, but every country saw it differently. So in the United States, the men went overseas to fight, but there weren't any bombs in the US other than Pearl Harbor. So it was very different than in England, where there was never a land war, but there was a lot of aerial bombardment. And so, people that were civilians were involved. And then, of course, in mainland Europe, there was, all sorts of different things. And so every aspect was different. And then, I mean, there was the whole Asian front too. I'm not discounting that. But England was the only country that ever did anything like the evacuation. And they really did move 3 million children in the 2 days before war was declared out of their homes to go live with strangers. And some of them only stayed away a little while, but some were gone the entire year, or the entire war for 6 years. And you had children that went to Welsh coal mining villages, and when they came back, they no longer spoke English. So they now couldn't talk to their parents that they hadn't seen for 6 years. So it was a really hard thing, and it was very traumatic. And a lot of the the evacuees now are in their 80s and 90s, so we're losing them. But when they were in their 60s and 70s, an awful lot of them started writing down their memoirs. And in England, they still talk about this all the time. I went to a bookstore the last time I was in England, and I said, I went to the children's section and said, I'd like all your current books about evacuees. And they pulled like 4 or 5 novels off the shelf. You can dress up for Halloween as an evacuee there. If you go on Amazon UK, for 20 pounds, you can buy yourself an evacuee costume. So it's still very much part of their culture, but for most of those people, it was a really traumatic event. And I thought, what if we turned it around, and for one particular girl, it was the best thing that ever happened? And who would that person have to be, and how bad would her circumstance have to be that all of these hard things about the evacuation are still there, and they're still true, but it still is the best thing that ever happened. And that's where it started.
Right. And ties in with a question that's just coming from a child called Anaya Kanchan, who says, what inspired you to create this character and write the story? And I think you've just answered her question before she could ask it.
Very good. Yes.
The previous questions came from Sayuri Sinha and Sanika Kote. Sanika Kote says, I actually started reading this book before the Neev Literature Festival. It's an amazing book. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a very intriguing topic.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you. And I've had a lot of people ask why a clubfoot. And that's a choice I made. I wanted Ada at the beginning to be in a prison. I mean, I wanted her to be really trapped in that one room, but I wanted her to be a strong character. And I knew if she could, she would have already escaped. So I had to give her some kind of problem that would keep her trapped, sort of physically. And I just kind of went through all the things that might affect someone, but a clubfoot is, it doesn't affect your hands, it doesn't affect your brain or your speech or your emotions. And it's just a structural problem. It's not even genetic. It's how the baby develops in utero. And it can be fixed. So it kind of ticked all the boxes.
Right. I remember you did a lot of research on the different types of clubfoot and what does it look like in children.
Yeah. I mean, I actually have a slide when I can do my own slideshow. I have a picture of a newborn baby with club feet, both club feet, because it can be one or either. But I also have a slide that is from an anatomy book from the 1800s that shows the different ways you could turn the foot. And then the next page that I
So we have a question that's come.
Ada and then Della from Fighting Words are the two characters that mean the most to me. This is Fighting Words. And I think Fighting Words was the best writing, but also the thing that took the most heart to write, maybe. Yeah.
It's what we were wondering about when we were at the books and we were talking about them. And the world finds itself in a place which is quite difficult all over now. Do books on difficult subjects, and we were wondering what you thought of it. Do they help readers who are in similar situations? What about readers who are not in situations like that? Do difficult books then sort of help them make them descend into gloom? As a writer, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it?
Yeah. Well, and the answer is yes and no, because very much it helps, I think, people going through hard things to know they aren't alone. And so if you read the Word That Saved My Life, I had a letter recently from a child who said that hard things had happened to her, but now because she read this, she understands sometimes when she misbehaves, she's really reacting because of how mixed up she feels inside and not because of what's happening. And so she says to her mother, okay, I'm feeling like Ada. And her mom says, oh, okay. And then they take care of it differently. And so that's something that's really, really lovely. But at the same time, I think that when you're in the middle of we're in the middle of this pandemic, it's very difficult. And I'm writing a book right now that takes another book from World War II in France. So I was researching the Holocaust, and I mean, it's very hard. And so, there were times when I would put my work down and I would start reading something like, When You Trap a Tiger, which was the new Newbery Medal, or this is a book called The Dactyl Hill Squad, which is dinosaurs and the American Civil War. So, it's fantasy, and you need to sometimes read something very happy. But I think that if you're a kid that hasn't had bad things happen too, these books like The War That Saved My Life are good for empathy. But also because children's literature needs to be hopeful. I mean, this book ends in a place of hope. And so does Fighting Words, which is really harder even. And I think that place of hope is really important. And so I think that's why fiction like this is very good. Sometimes nonfiction, you can't get a happy ending. It's just bad.
And as a writer, Kim, how do you keep your mental health in balance when you're writing about something so difficult?
Well, first of all, I think that I had to get to a point of a certain degree of just my own mental health before I could write about difficult things. Because some of this, although these are not my stories, there are things from my past that were hard that inform these. But the other thing is just to remember that I want to write from a place of hope. And And then another one is to spend lots of time reading stuff that is, soothing and calming. And I live on a farm. So the nice thing for me, COVID, we were all very isolated, but my daughter had to move back home with us from her school. She was supposed to go to graduate school in England and had to delay a year. So she's been home working, but here, and I can always just go out and walk in our fields. And so it hasn't been as hard on me as it has been on many people. But also I think I've gotten used to, coping, all the things that you can do that are healthy to make you feel better.
And you've said that there might probably be another part where we can see Ruth and Ada's story come full circle.
Yes, I actually was supposed to go to England last August, specifically to research that book, and obviously I couldn't go, but hoping I can go this fall. My daughter is going to start grad school, we think, in September, and so I hope I'll be able to go up there and study. I want to follow Ruth to Bletchley Park, where they had all this clandestine, war stuff. I think that would be interesting.
Excellent. Yeah, we can't wait for that to happen. We really hope that you get to make that trip.
I hope so too.
We also wanted to ask you, Kim, about the Appalachian Literacy Initiative that you've co-founded.
Thank you. Yes.
And let me just give our viewers a quick brief on what the initiative is about. Is where the organization that Kim has co-founded, she makes sure that there are children in 4th grade classrooms from underserved communities who have access to books of their choice. And these are books that are age appropriate, that are new. And it is now in 5 states, is that right?
Yes. No, it's not all of 5 states. I mean,
right.
But it is in schools in 5 states, yes.
Right.
This year we have about 2,000 children enrolled. So one thing that we know is that the more books children have access to, the better they're reading and the better they do in school, because reading becomes the skill that allows you to learn other things. So, and it's also something that requires practice to become good at. And I'm sure, India, it's the same thing. There's sort of a level of rural, away from the cities, poverty, where you can't get to libraries and you can't get, there aren't bookstores. And the schools sometimes here are not funded very well. And so there aren't a lot of books. And so we found that just by giving children books, it really helps them. And of course, if they get to pick the book, they're much more likely to read it because they've picked out something that interests them. So we send the teachers a box of books and the kids look through them and then they decide they're all different, which one they want. And the teachers send us an order and then we send them the books. So they all get their own copies. And it's really been super. I've been keeping track of the ones that are the most popular. They're graphic novels. So we have a graphic novel called The Bad Guys, which is really popular this year. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Captain Underpants. I mean, those will always be popular. Because of Winn-Dixie, which is a book about a dog that's really nice. The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, because kids really like spooky stories. And he's very good at spooky, that's age appropriate. Almanac, it was a National Geographic book and it just had lots of facts in it. We have some Guinness Book of World Records kind too. So sometimes kids really like nonfiction. And then actually The War That Saved My Life is really popular. That's one of the ones we offer. So yeah, we're delighted. Next year we're gonna do 3rd grade. So next year we'll do 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Excellent. And I was just wondering about this. The War That Saved My Life won the Newbery Honor in 2016. Fighting Words won the Newbery Honor in 2021. Has all of this helped? I mean, how do you feel? I mean, of course, about winning 2 Newbery Honors, that's one question that's coming.
Yeah.
But has also all of this sort of fueled and helped the Appalachian Literacy Initiative?
Oh yeah, well, first of all, Appalachian Literacy Initiative is only 3 years old. So it was after the first Newbery. But yes, when you get the little sticker on your book, there's the sticker. they stay in print and a lot more kids read it. And that's really meaningful to me, especially Fighting Words is about a difficult, now this is my copy, so it doesn't have, but the sticker goes right there. So imagine a sticker. You know that it's going to reach a lot more children, and that's really nice. And it sort of does give you a bigger platform where you can talk about things. And one way that's helped with Appalachian Literacy Initiative is me being able to go and say, this is important, will you give us some books? And publishers have donated. So there's a Thorndike is a publisher that does large print versions, and they just donated almost 5,000 books to us. So they probably wouldn't do that if I weren't one of their authors and had been able to talk to them about it. And I probably wouldn't have a large print version if I didn't have the Newbery Honor. So yeah, I mean, it makes a big difference. And it's, you can't control awards, you can only write the book. It's not like winning a race where the fastest one, I mean, no one knows what the best book is, but it still is very deeply meaningful. So it's nice.
That's lovely. I know we have exactly 2 minutes to wrap up, so I'll ask you our one final question that we ask all our authors, Kim. If you could have a shelf of books that have helped make you who you are, what would the titles on the shelf be?
It would be a bunch. I would have to say The Secret Garden would be one from a long time ago. I was a big fan of the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. There's a book called A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And that book I thought was the first time when I read a book that I went back and started reading it immediately because I wanted to know how it became so good. So I started deciding what the writers were. Everything by Jane Austen except Northanger Abbey, which I don't much like, is quite important to me. And then there's an awful lot of modern books that are really meaningful to me. There's one called A Wish in the Dark by Christina Torvat that there are things that I wish I could have written. And it's another one that's not very well known called The Book of Boy, which was a Newbery Honor a few years ago. And whenever I find a book I wish I could have written, I try to figure out why. What is it that author has that I have yet to develop? And I think that's really a meaningful thing.
Thank you so much, Kim. This has been an excellent interaction for all of us. We really hope that we can see you sometime and that the weather is nicer and the air pollution in India is better when you come in.
Yes.
But we're so looking forward to all of your new work.
Thank you so much. I would love to come back, and I'm grateful to be able to talk to you all today. It's very good.
Thank you so much. I'm sure our audience really liked it as well. Thank you to our audience for being here. Our next interaction is with the author John Connolly, the Irish writer. It's happening tomorrow at 4 p.m. Please do follow us on our Facebook page to get all of the latest updates on all of our events. We hope that you stay safe, that you take care, that we'll see you soon. Happy reading. See you.